On the list of issues the U.S. Supreme Court has taken on in recent years, few are as contentious as the one the justices agreed on Friday to consider: same-sex marriage. In a CBS News poll last month, just over half of Americans, 51%, said same-sex marriage should be legal. 41% said it should not. Joining us is Suzanne Goldberg, a professor at the Columbia University Law School. Good morning.
Good morning.
How important is what the Supreme Court has decided to do here?
Well, this is enormously important. As the country is moving more and more to embracing the question, same-sex couples' right to marry, the question is, what does the law say about it? And this is what the Supreme Court will tell us by the end of June.
And they're really looking at two cases here. What are the specifics of those cases, and what do you think they're going to be looking for within each?
Right, so there are two cases. One involves Edie Windsor, a widow in New York, who was faced with a more than $300,000 tax bill because the government refused to recognize her marriage to her same-sex partner. And the question there is whether the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, which blocks the United States government from recognizing marriages of same-sex couples, will stand. Will it continue, or will marriage discrimination by the government, federal government, come to an end? The other case involves a California law which bans marriage recognition for same-sex couples. It actually took away marriage rights from same-sex couples. And the question in that case is what will happen in California, and perhaps what will happen in other states throughout the United States.
What does it mean if that ban is upheld?
So if the ban is upheld in California, it means that same-sex couples will not be getting married in California. And it means that there's a question then about what will happen with marriage rights for same-sex couples in the rest of the country. Of course, any state can allow same-sex couples to marry, and many do.
Right.
But the question is whether the law will require that.
And if the law makes it into the Supreme Court, which you say there's actually some question of whether this is actually going to follow through, what will the outcome mean for the country?
Well, this is an enormous American question. Where are we headed with marriage for same-sex couples? And really more broadly, where are we headed with civil rights and equality? And if the Supreme Court strikes down the Defense of Marriage Act and strikes down the ban in California on same-sex couples' marriages, it will mean we will move to a more equal place. If it reaches a different conclusion, then we'll see what happens.
So what are the arguments that we're likely to hear on both sides then?
Right, so the argument against marriage rights for same-sex couples is generally that marriage historically, traditionally, has been something limited to different sex couples. But the Supreme Court has for a long time in many contexts held that tradition alone is not enough to justify discrimination. And on the other side, the real point is marriage, when we're talking about marriage recognized by the state, as opposed to by a church or a synagogue or religious institution, marriage by the state is about a civil right. And in those cases, government discrimination shouldn't be coming into play.
Do we know at this point, do we have any sense of how the Supreme Court might line up on this?
Well, it's hard to say. My view is that despite what a lot of people seem to say, this is increasingly a nonpartisan issue, and I think we're seeing that in general polling data around the country. Now, what exactly the Supreme Court will do, we can't know, but I have to think that given the Supreme Court's history, both on gay rights cases and on some civil rights cases generally, we are moving toward equality, and we are moving toward an end to discrimination and the exclusion of same-sex couples from marriage.
All right, Suzanne Goldberg, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you.